Hey everyone, today I got Scott Bowen with us from Roswell, Georgia. And I was talking with Scott before the show and I saw Roswell and I was like, wait a minute, Rossville is just down the road from our office. And so I got really excited because Scott is in the real estate turnkey space, I believe, does some coaching that we'll get into obviously in the show. But yeah, I actually came across his profile on LinkedIn and just went down that rabbit hole. And I started looking more and more into his profile. I'm like, holy cow, this guy has accomplished a lot. And so I reached out to him, said, hey, we gotta have a show together. And he was gracious enough to accept the invitation. And so Scott, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely excited. We started getting a little bit into his background story, and I was like, wait a minute, stop right there, because he's got some pretty cool things that we're going to obviously dive into. But yeah, generally what we like to do is just maybe tell us a little bit about your background and your family, and then we'll kind of get into, like how you got into real estate. So maybe start there.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in Atlanta, so I'm born and raised, which is unique. When you talk to a lot of people from Atlanta, they're like, they're transplants and things like that. So it's a little bit unique to be born and raised here. But yeah, I grew up here, just kind of grew up suburban kid, and went to school at Auburn, War Eagle, and we talked about that for a minute, a
That
few
rough
minutes.
game. We won't get into that.
We won't get into the 4th and
For,
31.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, that was hard. But yeah, no, so I went there and then came back to Atlanta. I started working for a commercial development real estate company, and we developed retail properties in and around Atlanta and a few other areas. So that's my background. I got married when I was 26, which was 2001. And so I've been married for, what is that, 22 years, have a daughter in college. I've got
Wow.
a 17-year-old son and then a 12-year-old son as well. So they keep us busy, but I can also see, the silver lining of empty nesting on the horizon. So that's looking pretty good too.
Are you excited for that, by the way?
I am 100% excited about that for sure.
See, me too. I mean, I'm like a decade behind you, but I'm already looking forward to that. I'm like, we're going to be really good at this empty nester thing. I'm convinced.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, it was, my daughter left for college, in August, and that was, she was a little bit like the glue of the family, between the
Yeah.
boys and us and my wife and all that kind of stuff. So we're definitely missing her, and that's been a little bit of a challenge. But empty nesting is, yeah, we're looking forward to that for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, all these people are like, it goes by so fast. I'm like, it's not going fast enough. All right. Like, I've been doing this for a while now. So we have 5 kids and we
Oh
have
man,
20-year-olds. And I'm like, man, I swear we've been doing this for a long
I know.
time. So we're ready for the empty nester phase. But
Yeah,
I guess we're
I
getting ahead
felt
of
like I
ourselves.
gave a kid a bath for like 15 years in a row, like at least.
Right. Changing diapers, man. I'm like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
we've got our fix. It's not going fast anymore.
yeah,
But anyways, I say that, and obviously you look back at some of the, photos that come up, you're like, oh yeah, it
exactly,
looks appealing, right? When you look at the pictures, you're like, oh, it's so fun. So
exactly.
anyways, it's
Yeah.
funny how that works. But okay, so you went to Auburn, and so what happened? So Auburn, you worked with a company then for 11 years, you mentioned,
Hmm.
and then what was the catalyst for going from that to your next gig?
Yeah. So, ironically, that 10, I can't remember exactly the years, but it basically brought us to that financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And I think at that point, we had some development deals that I was invested in personally. And it was kind of a wake up call of like, okay, this is not always roses. This is not always going to be the gold at the end of the rainbow. And, fortunately we didn't have to file bankruptcy or any of those kind of things, but there was a time period where I was like, okay, we might be headed that direction. We had some development deals, with some construction loans that could have been called and things like that. So, we skated out of that, and I really took some time to really, decide, like, what am I going to do? Like, is this really the path I'm going to go down? Because in the commercial world, we were doing pretty large developments. Your whole net worth is kind of on the line while those developments are going on and being developed. And so that was challenging, but it was in that time when a friend of mine invited me to go to Africa. We went to a country called Zambia, and it was literally the first day I arrived or put my foot on the soil, like everything in my world just kind of flipped around. My perspective on the world, my perspective on people, and all these kind of things was very much impacted by my time there. So much so, I came back and got super involved in trying to help start what they were trying to do over there, which ultimately led me to partnering with another gentleman, and we started a organization, 501c3 nonprofit organization that works with kids in Uganda. It's called Champions United, and we do leadership and development training for middle school and high school age boys in and around in soccer and soccer leagues. So they come and they join our programs for free, and then they're connected with the local Ugandan male figure who's their coach, and they just basically spend their whole time investing in the lives of these kids and just giving them some, just some good life skills and life direction as they grow older. So that totally changed my life in a lot of ways, in a lot of good ways. But one of the things, and probably the most interesting thing to most of the listeners, is I realized at that point I was going to go into a life of nonprofit work. And so I was like, I got to figure out a way to supplement my income. And just having the background in real estate, I was like, okay, I had not had a lot of experience with single family houses, but I was like, I'm going to start this and just see what it looks like to buy a house. And so I did it traditionally, 20% down. I bought a house, bought a second house, and just kind of fumbled through and navigated. I questioned a lot about, like, is this the right thing? Should I just buy Apple stock and hold it? I don't know what, exactly I'm doing here. I think I bought my first house in 2009. So what is that? That's, a good 13, 14 years ago. And I can definitely see that the people who talked about compounding interest when I was a kid that were actually right. I've enjoyed a lot of the compounding, the appreciation, and those kind of things in my portfolio. But that's kind of how I got started, to give you a framework.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, a lot to digest there. So really, you got into real estate more or less to cover your expenses or your dream of helping people in Uganda, and so you have this awesome, huge purpose behind what you're doing, which I think is super cool and important actually. And it's interesting. I feel like once you have that purpose, then the money side seems to just kind of fall into place. And I don't know if that's how it was with you. I'm sure there were some struggles along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, like, so after investing, for yourself and doing most of that in Alabama, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I was focused. I had some relationships in the Auburn area. That's where I originally started. Since then, I kind of migrated down to Montgomery and bought some houses over in Montgomery, and then that led me to Dothan. So I've been working kind of that southeastern Alabama for a while.
Okay. And then yeah, so started investing out there for yourself. And then what led you to the point where you decided, okay, like this has been great for me and it's working out, and I think I've kind of figured out a few things along the way. At what point did you decide then to open that up to, because now are you currently, coaching investors and helping others invest as well? Is that what you're doing now?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I do. I think it's, once you start doing something like this, you just get people asking you questions, and it kind of came out of the woodwork just in terms of friends and family and just different people who would hear like, oh, Scott's got these houses or whatever. And so having these conversations, I realized just people were interested, and they wanted to understand what it looked like, I think. And a lot of this was before, podcasts were a big thing. Obviously we had the internet, but it wasn't that long ago.
Not that
Um,
old, yeah.
but I don't remember having a lot of like resources when I started. Like I would read blogs or I read some stuff on the internet. And I think as podcasting became more popular, shows like Bigger Pockets and things like that, where people were just talking about investing on a small scale. Cause I think there was more conversations around more like developments and maybe commercial stuff. But, anyway, from a small scale perspective, I started getting a lot of conversations with people who just wanted to learn and understand and what it looked like. That actually led me to I had my real estate license when I worked with the development company, but I didn't really have it active. But I was like, oh well, maybe I can help you buy some properties, because I was buying, and so I couldn't buy everything. So I thought, well, maybe I can help other people buy. One of my superpowers, by the way, is just finding property, like evaluating and finding properties. I don't know. I guess that's just a lot of reps, that developed. But so I would find deals and find things, and I would just say, "Hey, you should buy this. You should buy this." And like, so I had a base of clientele that I would just send properties to and tell them to buy them, and they hopefully would. So it kind of started as being a real estate agent and just helping people one on one. And then I realized that, a lot of my clients in Georgia, especially, I'd have to drive a good ways to find, I might be driving to Rossville, Georgia, to find a property or open a door for
Mhm.
someone. And, that's a whole afternoon for me to do that. And I was like, this doesn't seem like it's highest and best use of my time. And then also, like, I'm not an expert in that market. I can run the analysis and those kind of things, but I don't know the local real estate market that well. And so I just figured like the best thing I could do for my clients was to find them a local agent in a certain market that knew the
Mhm.
market well and help them work with that agent. And then I would just coach them on the real estate side of things about, how to find a property and how to, build relationships in the market and really go deep and build and scale up their portfolio in those markets. And so I was just started doing that, and I realized if I can do that for people in Georgia, I could do it for people anywhere. And then that kind of led me to coaching or mentoring other investors, essentially via the internet or Zoom calls and things like that.
So smart. And it's cool how the progression, happens. So I'm curious, okay, because I know running a turnkey operation here in Chattanooga, I know that there are a lot of pitfalls and issues that we come across just daily. And it's just this constant, we're trying to plug holes right and left and figuring out, okay, what's the issue today? Um, what does your operation look like today? Like, do you have employees, or is it just you? Like, how does that look?
Yeah. So, obviously when I started, I had 0 doors, 0 units. And, as that has grown, with the single family side of things, and some small multi-families, duplexes, triplexes. A few years back, we got into the mobile home park business. And so I've been acquiring those in the last 4 or 5 years. And so that's led me to kind of scale up my administration or admin support.
Yep.
Um, Prior to that, it was really just me and kind of a part-time 5 hour a week kind of bookkeeper, kind of doing everything. So it's pretty lean. But when we started increasing our number of units, we're getting over 150 units now, and it's just a little bit more. So we've got number one, we got a local manager that we like essentially have on payroll in our market. So that's one employee. And then a full time, essentially, well, probably 20, 25 hour a week bookkeeper. And then also some other admin support that kind of helps some of the other coaching side of my business and things like that, just in terms of scheduling and those kind of things. But I don't know if I've never
Wow.
been a great delegator. Like I've just
Mhm.
I've always struggled with that, and so I've just essentially probably cram too much on my plate for the most
Mhm.
part and try to handle it all myself. But I guess it's worked to this point. But that's what it looks like right now is kind of me and then a few other, helping hands.
Very cool. So on the property management side, on the manufactured home, are they mainly just dealing with those manufactured homes, or do they do the manufactured home parks as well as the single family stuff? Are they handling everything, or how does that look?
Yeah. So just kind of my philosophy in terms of, property management in general. I'm a big proponent of third party property managers. So in the different markets that I'm investing in, I have, third party, property manager companies. The only one that we actually have in house property management um, is the mobile home park business, and that's more of a function of a lot of these third party companies don't really want to to manage mobile home parks for various reasons. And so that's why we've elected to go this route. And once you get to a certain scale of number, then it makes some sense to go ahead and bring it in house.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's say that I'm a new student of yours, and I'm interested in getting, into real estate. I want to start buying some rental properties. I understand the value there, and so you mentioned, your philosophy is third party property managers, which, by the way, is before I came out of Chattanooga, that was my intent and hope was to be able to find a phenomenal property management company because I think we both know that that'll make or break
Yeah.
any investment property, and it's kind of like the one piece that you just got to get right. So and we tried a couple, didn't work out great at all, and so lost quite a bit of money on those ventures. So yeah, I mean, it got to the point where, like you, I'm like, well, I guess I got to do it by myself. And so I'm
Hmm.
curious, someone like you who has that personality of wanting to do everything by themselves, how are you able to find a property management company? What is your process that you go through to screen for a really good property management company that is going to do a good job?
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously you learn some of the things that you don't want, I think, more so than anything. Um, and so when you go to, yeah, I guess the answer honestly is like trial and error. I mean,
Yeah.
we've definitely tried that. So you think you got a good person, you think you got a good company, and you say, "All right, let's do it," and then you realize the things you don't like, and so then when you go to the next one, you're like, "Okay, well, we'll make sure those things are covered and not giving you exposure there." But um,
How much of
so
a time would you give them before you realize, oh, that was a mistake? Like, I mean,
yeah,
are you doing a month to month agreement with them? Are you signing an annual agreement? How does that look?
yeah, no, I would typically sign an annual agreement with the intent to obviously keep working with them.
Yeah.
And then, it's like, I think you need a few months just to kind of see how things go, and really kind of learn their style. I think more I've worked with other ones, like everyone kind of has their own style. And
Hmm.
I think there's certain styles that I resonate with. For example, the one that I have in Montgomery, they operate a lot of units, and they have a lot in that market, and they're super systematic, they're super structured, and as a result, on the negative side, there's some things I'm just like, that's like, I feel like it's wasting money. I
Hmm.
feel like they maybe allow tenants to ask for everything, like a clogged toilet, they'll send someone out to fix it. It's like, well, some of these things these people can do themselves.
Yeah.
But they're so systematic. I think it's actually the tenants really like it because they know, like, someone's on call, someone's always going to be there. They're going to answer the phone. So it's like a big picture perspective of like, okay, well, I feel like I get nickel and dimed a little bit here and there because of their structures and their systems. But if
Yeah.
the tenant appreciates it and they stay longer, and that's one less turnover I have to deal with, then big picture, maybe that's worth it. And so I kind of ride that fence of like,
Hmm.
them doing exactly the way I want it to be done.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, it's like I really appreciate the systematic, organized. I know my deposits are always going to be there. I know my statement's always going to look the certain way, and I know they're going to have a certain process they use for tenant screening and things like that. So I feel like really good about the tenants that come in.
Yep.
So I appreciate that more than maybe like kind of the mom and pop shop that's trying to piecemeal it all together, and maybe they manage 20, 40 properties or something like that.
Hmm.
So I kind of lean that way, although I think there's negatives to both, and you kind of have to know, where you kind of just use gut instinct to know like what's going to be best suited for you and your investing style.
Yeah, and I'm curious, as someone that's I've purchased properties in Mobile, Alabama, and multiple different markets, obviously in Tennessee and Michigan, some other areas, and so some of those we've had property management companies, and others we've been the ones managing it. And so the question I have for you, and I'd be curious to see what your feedback is on it, is what are your thoughts on the maintenance side? Like, I mean, how do you manage that side of it? I feel like that's one of the most difficult, sticky situations where you're like, is it really necessary? Kind of what you brought up. Are they gouging me? Do you have any type of system or way that you have been able to, more or less rig the system where you're like, man, I know that if I vet maybe up front better, and if I ask these questions and if I set these parameters, that I'm going to be okay. Because one thing with that question is I've been torn between in-house property management or in-house repairs, right? Or they have third-party vendors that they vet and send, and then they don't actually have like their own people that they're sending to it. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, which way do you lean, and are there ways that you've been able to vet and deal with those issues?
Yeah, I think there's a couple thoughts I have on that. I think in terms of just like third party, outsourcing to like a plumber, HVAC guy, or whatever. Um, I feel like at the end of the day, like I don't. It's a tough call, but I
Yeah.
think, and I think that's why you're asking the question. But I feel like I guess I lean more towards the in-house side of things if they're capable to manage. And I've seen
Yep.
the ones that I've had that do that well. That'd be a benefit for me, and I think a benefit for the tenant, because they kind of control the whole ecosystem, of the experience that the tenant has. And I'm probably a little more sensitive to that than anything else, because I feel like the turnover of a tenant is, way worse than anything a property manager could do. So if they have a terrible experience with the property manager, and they want to leave and they're just moving out, then I think then I'm going to be way worse off. So
Yeah.
so I've seen like the kind of the ecosystem of like the control of like all the communication goes through one point. There's not a third part like that person. Let's call it a plumber that works for the management company. He goes in there, he represents the management company, and
Hmm.
therefore they have a little more say in how he responds and how he talks to the tenants and things like that, versus
Yep.
a third party HVAC or plumber guy or girl that comes in
Hmm.
there and and it may not care as much or may not represent that company and could leave a bad
Yeah.
taste in their mouth and things like that. So it's a toss up, honestly, and I'd probably try it either way. But I think it just over time I'm kind of more bent towards that style.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I had one manager that subbed it all out and those kind of things, and I just felt like it was fine, but it never
Yeah.
really was perfect either.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's a difficult property management. To your point, you're saying all the things that we've seen obviously as well. Is just it is a trial and error. Unfortunately, you got to see if you're a good fit for one another, because we've fired owners before, and I think that surprises some people where we're like, look, we're just not a good fit. Like I mean, you guys want a little bit more micromanagement, and you
Right.
should probably manage it yourself
Yeah.
versus us. And so we've come across that, but. The other question I have for you is, I know you just got into manufactured homes and the mobile home park. What are some differences? Like, which do you like more? Is there one that you lean, like if you could just do manufactured homes all the time, you would do that, or what? Where are you at with that?
Man, that's a loaded question. I think and you talk about falling flat on your face at times, or the failures. I think the mobile home park business, as confident as I was as an investor going
Yeah.
into it, it really, you know, kicked me below the belt to the point of like, what have I done?
See, this is what
Um,
I want to actually hear from you, because I've said for a long time I want to get into manufactured home parks. Like that's always kind of been my goal. So I would love to hear, yeah, what are those like yeah, kicks
yeah.
that you had?
Well, and there's, the more people I talk to who are in that business, way more so than like single family house investing, there's just a million ways to skin the cat. Some people just
Yeah.
want lot rent. Some people are owner financing, selling the trailers, and like they have all the different programs. And everybody you talk to thinks like this is the way you should do it. And you have to figure out what your plan is. And we had no plan going into it. We were just
Um,
like, okay, the numbers look great. Like you
yep.
talk about 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, like the 1%
2% rule.
rule. It's like the
Yep.
2% rule, 2.5, and you get 3%. You're like, man, like why wouldn't everybody do this?
Yep.
But the one thing that everybody probably agrees on is like managing a mobile home park is a ton of work. Like it's a ton of management work.
Mm.
And I'm not geared up for that. Like I'm geared up to have a third party manager, like just, and my philosophy is like my time is way better spent being aggressive, going to finding properties, like talking to lenders and getting these deals done and across the finish line than I am managing the properties. And so when we got into the mobile home park side of things, it just became a huge management thing. And we were 3 to 4 hours away from a drive perspective. So we're not local. And the tenants in a mobile home park, there's a variety of people that live in mobile home parks,
Yeah.
and they've worked the system for years, and they've worked landlords for years, and I'm not used to being worked by the tenants. You know what I mean? So it was like
Yeah.
there's a lot of learning curves there. I think we had 3 different managers that we hired within like the first 6 months. And
Whoa.
yeah, so it was like, and so you're talking about like, okay, we spent all this money to buy these parks. We have this great plan. We're going to do all this stuff. And then almost instantly, it's like things are not working out. Things are not looking good. I would say like we bought most of our parks on average 75, 80% occupied. And then
Mm.
within like the first month, it's down to like 40%. Like people just started moving out. And I think
Whoa.
they were looking at us like a corporate outfit coming in, like we're going to go, we're going to, they're used to paying, Joe and number two his rent, every week or
Yep.
every month. And they're not used to mailing it in. They're certainly not used to paying it online. And so we lost a lot of tenants. So like,
Wow.
we were not planning for that. So losing tenants, losing managers, like all those things started compounding to the point where like, okay, what are we doing? But like anything else, you just kind of have to put one foot in front of the other. And that's what we did. We're like, okay, we're gonna have to work ourselves out of this thing. And it was a lot more capital than we thought to do that, and all those kind of things. And I feel like now we've gotten over the hump where it's like we've learned all those lessons. Like we almost have to stay with it now because like we've learned so much
Mm-hmm.
in all of this that we have to stay with it to see it through. And and we have like we're still acquiring, we're still growing, and we're being aggressive in that market to expand. But we definitely, the learning curve was way steeper than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah. Is that something that you coach people on now with the manufactured home? If they're interested in going that direction, would you coach them on that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't, maybe because I steer people away
Yeah,
with
right.
that
They hear your
story.
story.
Yeah. With that story. But yeah, I don't have any clients right now, but, I certainly would, coach somebody through at least, lessons and the things that we've learned as we've been in it. But yeah, I mean, it's great because I love learning things. I think it's awesome to learn stuff, and I love that I know more about this, this specific area in real estate. I think it's great. But in the moments, it's a little rough, and you really start to question, what's going on. And I can tell you this, I ended up doing that with a friend of mine, and who had a lot of history, doing single family houses as well. But we were both kind of new to this, and if we didn't have each other, then I think we would have both been done. Like we were just like, we're just out.
Really?
Yeah. Cause we kind of just, we just encourage each other, like, okay, we can do this. We can figure this out. Like, let's go through the numbers again. Let's go do it again.
Yeah.
And he's been a huge encouragement to me just sticking with it and keeping going. And now we're, I wouldn't say we're on the other side, but we're definitely over the top of the hill, and we
Mhm.
can see it starting to come together. So it's been good.
That's so funny. Yeah, I can just imagine these tenants like, "Oh, yeah, we got some fresh meat here. Like, we're gonna work this guy so good."
Yep.
Oh, man, they've been doing it for their entire life. That's too funny. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I don't really think about, but you're right. I could totally see that happening where anytime we take over any type of like management company or whatever, we have to weed through and be like, who's doing auto pay, who are the trouble
Right.
tenants, all that stuff. So I can't imagine that at scale. And yeah, so the folks that are renting there are not always like the easiest to work with, I imagine. So
Yep.
that's too funny. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually want to get back to Uganda and yeah, are you still involved with that?
I am still involved. Yes. I have a limited
What is that
role.
like?
I'm, from a work perspective, I'm probably 5 to 10 hours at the most a week. Real estate is definitely my main focus. I still am an agent, so I still help, people buy and sell their primary residences, and
Yeah.
then other investment properties as well, and then my own investing, and then the coaching. So that's how it all kind of rounds out.
Yep.
But I'm still involved. I love taking people over there. So if anyone wants to go to Uganda, hit me up and we'll figure out a
I
way to
would
get
love to go to Uganda.
Come on,
I'm
man.
not even joking. And it's interesting, like, I'm curious what your take is on this, 'cause, so we had a family from the Congo that they were in, um, like, refugee camps
Hmm.
for, man, like, 10 years, long time, and obviously there's war and stuff going on there. So then, they ended up coming to Arizona, and and so I got involved with some of the refugees
Okay.
just helping out or whatever,
Yeah.
and just fell in love with them.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I mean, they are like our adopted family, so we just can't. They're just such amazing people. But I guess on the other side, I always hear people being like, "Well, look, people in our backyard need help too,
Hmm.
right?" So, um, I don't know. I'm curious. What is why are we drawn? Like, why are you drawn to Africa? Because I'm the same way. I'm just curious if you thought about that. Like, what is it about Uganda? I guess.
Yeah. No, I've thought about it a lot. And I've taken a lot of people over there and I've seen them have similar responses to what you just described, and then also to what I experienced as well. And so I think there's a very stark difference in their life and culture and how they live than ours. And I don't know which is better, honestly. But the what I would say is they are very slow, like they are not in a hurry. They're very slow and they're very relational. And that's what people love is when they see, this relational side of these Ugandans. Like they're very genuine and sincere and understanding and wanting to understand people and what makes them tick, and like they're the things that they know. They remember, like we've taken hundreds of people to Uganda, and they remember everybody's name, their story. Like they remember all these details that we just don't do here on this side of the world.
Hmm.
And so you go from this like super busy, productive, like you're going to schedule time block your day in a million different ways to make sure you're the most productive, to sitting over there under a shade tree in Uganda and they're just having hour long conversation or longer, about life and different things. And I think what I see over there is just like, I sit there and think, what what's really more important than this? Like this conversation that I'm having right now with this person, like what could be more important than that? And it's just a really good, cold water to the face, for a lot of people. And a lot of people talk about the joy that they have in their spirit and things like that. And so you see people who have material, I can't say that word. They have very few material possessions, and but they're full of this joy. And so like we often strive for material wealth and things like that, thinking that's going to bring us that joy, but then we see it on the other side. We're like, wait a minute. So it's a weird dichotomy, kind of like, stark contrast to our lives. And I think that's what's attractive about that culture. But I 100% agree with you. There are needs like right in our backyard for sure. And my wife and I are, we're motivated to help those as well. I think we saw an opportunity. We saw a just a kind of an opening to do what we're doing in Uganda, and it's worked really well. And we've seen a lot of progress, and so we continue to do that. And so for us, it's been a fun, especially for our family's perspective, just a fun outlet for us to get outside of our normal, suburban bubble, and really just see people for who they are in a different culture, in a different context. So it's been really good.
Man, I love that answer. Yeah, so I mean, more than anything, I think you're right. It helps us reset our perspective on life, what's important, makes us reflect. Because I'm with you, man. It's so refreshing just to slow down, like turn off your phone, and you don't realize how wound you are, and until you go to a place like Uganda. I imagine, haven't been there, but do you know Thomas DeMoss, by the way? Does that name ring
The
a bell?
the Is he part of the foundation, the Demas
You know
Foundation?
what? So he adopted a couple kids, and I don't know if they were from Uganda or not. I want to
Okay.
say that they are, but he's in Chattanooga, and I should know because he's a buddy of mine. I should know where his kids were adopted from, but it was in Africa, and I'll have to. I was just curious that name popped in my head. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
that's good.
yeah, so he's been out there as well, obviously. So, no, that's so cool. Well, man, this has been as advertised, and I love learning about people's story, where they, their background, but most importantly, kind of what we're getting at now, where it's like, hey, what's the whole point of what we're doing? Like, business is fun, but what's it all? What are we doing? At the end of
Yeah.
the day, what are we doing here?
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so yeah, the questions that I like to end with, and yeah, would love to get your take on. Is there any certain book or podcast that you've been listening to this year that has had an impact on you? Just anything that you've come across that you've been like, man, this has been a huge help.
I don't know, man. Honestly, I haven't listened to many podcasts this year,
Yeah,
I would say.
yeah,
And I think a function of that is just working. I work from home. I don't have a big commute. My older kids are driving, so I'm not driving carpool and
yeah.
those kind of things. And so I just think
Mhm.
the opportunity for me um has been very limited. But I'm
Yeah,
always, I guess my go-to are the real estate radio guys. I love listening to them. They kind of give an old school
yeah.
perspective on real estate,
Uh-huh.
and even the fact they have the radio in their name, speaks to how long
Right,
they've been around.
right.
Because they used to have an
Yeah.
old radio program,
Uh-huh.
and I think they speak to the overall just kind of macroeconomics of real estate pretty well.
Mhm.
So they're kind of my go-to, as well as the bigger pockets guys.
Yep.
Just because I love talking, small single family house kind of real estate too, and I think they speak to that really well.
Yeah.
For the small investors. So I would say those two for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're cut from the same cloth. There's just something about single family homes. I know that there's obviously opportunity in multifamily, and
Yeah.
and everyone tells us that we need to get in that space, but I don't know. I'm just always drawn to, for whatever reason, the single family
I
stuff.
am
I think
too.
once you get that bug,
Yeah.
it's just what we know. But no, that's awesome. So if you could go back, like at the start of your, let's say even like 2008, when everything kind of started happening with real estate, is there anything that you would do differently? Is there like any advice that you would give yourself now that you know what you know now?
Yeah.
Is there one or two things that maybe you would have been like, man, if only I knew that, I would have done things differently?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I don't have a lot of regrets necessarily of what I've done, but I certainly, yeah, I think just the idea of like not knowing where I'm going, like seeing the bigger picture, the long term effects of real estate. I was
Yeah.
short sighted a lot of times, thinking like, oh man, I could sell this house and make 30 grand, and then I'm going to go buy this thing. And I had a more flipper kind of mentality. I think I was short minded
Mhm.
in the buy and hold process, side of things. And so I definitely like I was actually doing I'm trying to put together a post for LinkedIn, and I was looking at an
Mhm.
old house that I bought in 2009. I looked on Zillow, like the value of it now. And, I kind of ran the analysis, like, what if I held it, and like, it was a $300,000 swing basically for me to cash
Jeez.
out of that thing. I cashed out and made like maybe 10 grand after, paid agent fees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I swapped 10 grand I swapped 300 grand for 10 grand, those kind of things. I would have just, I think I would have held number one. Then number two, when I was doing commercial stuff, we basically did this Burr method, where
Hmm.
we would develop properties, and obviously the values based on the income, and so we get the income to a certain level that we could borrow money, that covered all of our costs and even more so. And so that Burr method, I started doing it pretty early on, but I didn't really perfect it and really didn't scale it till, I don't know, probably a good 6 or 7 years into, buying my first house.
Mhm.
So I would have, if I, could go back and know all the things I know now, I would have put together a really systematic way, to build relationships with wholesalers, find properties, Burr method. And I could have cranked out, 4 or 5x of what I did probably if I really had, focused on that. So not a lot of regrets, but I think I definitely could have, saved 6 or 7 years of kind of, wandering the desert, so to speak.
I think you just gave an identical answer to my life experience as well in real estate. Could not have said what you just said any better. And it's interesting too that I think that both of us kind of stumbled into where we're at now, where we're advising other people because now we've got a little bit of experience under our belt. Not saying we know everything by any stretch, but you do get to that point where you're like, I know what it was like to see that $20,000 profit and get super pumped and make that money and put it in your bank account and look at it and you're like, yeah, that was awesome. I'm excited, and you get a rush every time you do it. It's just that dopamine. But yeah, holy smokes, to your point. Yeah, I don't even want to do that. Like I don't think I could do that. If I go back and look at all the homes that we've sold, I mean, there's thousands of them. And you just think to yourself, man, if I just would have been smart, held 10% of them even, one out of every 10 homes that I wholesaled, why didn't I do that?
Yeah.
So that's for sure what I imagine you're preaching and coaching, and same here. It's just, look, buy and hold. Warren Buffett was pretty smart. I would, probably just kind of follow what he does and be that boring investor.
Yeah.
And you can make a lot of money in real estate, and it does compound like crazy. So, man, I love that. Yeah, it's such a good point. And it's cool for me. It's super fulfilling now that, I have, I call them kids now, because I mean, they're in their 20s. And they're coming to us, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, please listen to me. Like, I know you're going to see this number, I know you're going to get excited because you have equity, but just, dude, hold it, I promise. Like, give it to your kids, give it to your grandkids. Like, it's going to make a big difference. So yeah, I love that answer, could not agree more. That's awesome. So where can people find you that want to learn more about investing in real estate, and they really like what you're talking about? Where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, I'm not super awesome with social media and things like that, but one platform that I really have taken to recently is LinkedIn. You can find me. You could search Scott Bowen Real Estate. I'm sure I would come up at some level. But from there you can just find links to basically direct message me, set up a consultation if you want to. And that's primarily for my coaching services. You can see a lot of information there. But yeah, if you're interested, I know there's a lot of resources, a lot of outlets, a lot of education material out there, but I love walking beside someone, just, from day one to buying that first property and setting up the system that they're going to use to scale and develop their portfolio. So if I can be an assistant to that, then I would love to do it. But LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to me or to find out more about me.
Yeah, and Scott's super humble. I will attest to his LinkedIn posts are gold. Like there's a lot of stuff, a lot of content, to your point, out there, right? And you can Google a million people in the real estate space, but yours is one of the very few where I was like, man, that's really thoughtful. It's really and you always learn something, which I love as well. And so it's like applicable. You can use it. And so, like I would definitely recommend people go, check out Scott, his LinkedIn, make sure you follow him. He's got a lot of solid content. He doesn't just post, fluff. A lot of it's got meat to it. And so it's one of the ones that I enjoy looking at. So
that's good.
Scott, dude, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
It's been awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.